The Chattooga is one of the Southeast's last free-flowing mountain streams, running along the borders of Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. For most of its length, it's hemmed in by the forest, without farms, homes, or any other signs of civilization. It tumbles through rapids, around boulders, and into quiet pools, yet remains remarkably close to major cities. Accessible by road in only 5 places, each crossing divides the river into near equal sections of wild, unspoiled water. This is from U.S. Forest Service's 1971 Chattooga Wild and Scenic River Study.
This is the Outfall.
This is the Outfall.
This is the Outfall,
where water,
infrastructure,
and untold stories meet.
In the summer of 1960, Atlanta was still finding its footing as a major southern city. John F. Kennedy had just secured the Democratic nomination, months away from the presidency. In that changing landscape, James Dickey was making a transformation of his own. A World War II Air Corps veteran who served as a radar operator, navigator, turned advertising executive, Dickey had just left his comfortable job writing copy for Coca-Cola to pursue poetry and teaching. His war years still haunted his work, but he was increasingly drawn to the wild places of the South, landscapes that felt ancient and untamed. His weekend crew consisted of King, a sales executive, and Brazelton, an Atlanta lawyer. Together, they carved out time for canoe trips down North Georgia's rivers. Ironically, they never managed to paddle the Chattooga. The one time they tried, the water was running too high, a decision that would later take on a strange significance. The Coosawhattie River, which would later surface in Deliverance, was already facing its own fate. Construction began in 1962 on Carter's Dam, a project that would drown 3,200 acres of the gorge and turn a wild river into a still lake. Before that happened, Dickey and his friends took one last trip. They carried basic gear, loaded their canoes with tents, cooking supplies, and bows. The first night, they camped on a sandbar with fresh trout sizzling over a fire under a star-filled sky. A year later, around that different campfire, the 3 men began unpacking what that river revealed. Remember when King was studying that map and that boy appeared out of nowhere? Scared the hell out of me. 14, maybe with a .22 rifle and a dog. Thought I was a revenue agent. And we met his mama. Lord, what she said through those rotten teeth? She didn't want us poking around that creek. Then that moonshine appeared, stuff that could strip out that paint. But they were decent folks, decent people, more decent than we deserve, some stumbling around their world. Later, when we hit those rapids, man, I never felt so helpless. But we didn't break. That's what that river taught us, who we really were underneath the lies. Exactly. And King, you said it then. This would make a great story. I did. There was something in that fear, that hospitality, that wildness. A story, maybe. But what kind of story? A book, Jim. About men stripped of control. About meeting lives nothing like their own. What would you call it? Maybe something what that river delivers you to. Or from. Deliverance. Deliverance. Perfect. You just heard 3 men around a campfire name a story that would change everything. But here's what they didn't know that night. They were about to save a river they never even paddled. Everyone's Chattooga story is a little different. For some, it starts with their first paddle through calm water, eventually working up to the rapids like Bull Sluice, Corkscrew. For me, it began as a research project, driving back roads, testing water quality in tributaries, later learning to kayak and passing that obsession to my kids around campfires on its shores. But here's the thing. none of our stories should exist. This river should have been drowned decades ago, because this isn't really the story of deliverance. This is the story of how a river was saved. It's 1974. Lots of major rivers in the Southeast have been dammed, tamed, turned into a chain of lakes. Look at the map. The Tougaloo River downstream, 4 massive dams. Duke Power to the east turned an entire watershed into reservoirs. The Chattooga sits right in the middle. 50 miles of untamed whitewater that somehow escaped. The answer is the crazy part. Its salvation depended on a frustrated aircraft engineer in New York, a poet's dark obsession, and a movie that would terrify and captivate audiences. You know, if you look at a map of the Chattooga, you'll notice its sharp, almost unnatural turn toward the Savannah River. That bend wasn't always there. Long ago, the Chattooga flowed south with the Chattahoochee toward the Gulf of Mexico. But the Tougaloo River had other plans. Over thousands of years, it cut through an ancient ridge, captured both the Chattooga and Tallulah in one dramatic geologic theft, carving out the gorge we know today and sending the waters east to the Atlantic. That heist still matters. The Chattahoochee lost part of its watershed, and you have to wonder, would Atlanta's water struggles look different if those flows had never been stolen? A river stolen by nature. Centuries later, nearly stolen again by electrifying progress. But salvation began in the unlikeliest place. A wartime factory on Long Island where one engineer's frustration sparked a revolution in how we traveled rivers. It's May 1944, while Allied forces prepare for D-Day just miles away. William Hoffman, chief tool engineer at Grumman Aircraft, is exhausted. Hoffman was in his late 30s with the slouched posture of a man who had spent too many nights bent over drafting tables and factory floors. His hands were permanently stained with graphite and grease. Thick glasses framed eyes that hadn't truly rested in months. His factory was producing one F-6 Hellcat every single hour. Hoffman, you look like hell. When was the last time you slept? Sleep? I'll sleep when I'm caught up. We're running 2 shifts and I'm still behind. The jigs are lining up, the hydraulic presses keep slipping out, and I've got green apprentices drilling holes like they're making Swiss cheese. You've been at it for 14 hours straight. 14, try 20. Yesterday I had to tear down an entire fuselage section because the rivet pitch was off by 1/16 of an inch. 16! That's the difference between a plane flying home or dropping into the Pacific. Bill, listen to me. You're no good to me dead on your feet. You need air. Go north. Go fish. Take a break. The boys here can handle a day without you. A break? In the middle of all this? That's an order. Go clear your head. So Hoffman did. He packed his gear and headed north far from Long Island's factories to the Adirondack Mountains. The dark tannin-stained water stretched out like black glass, towering balsams and white pines standing along the rocky shore. There, Hoffman met up with his friend Bob. Remind me again why we thought this was a vacation? Because you promised me fresh air and peace. You forgot to mention hauling 80 pounds of canoe uphill. Only a mile and change. Think of it as character building. Character building? My shoulders feel like they're being torn out of their sockets. I've been metal for a living, Bob, not carry it. You're an engineer. Design us a better canoe while you're at it. Hoffman wiped the sweat off his glasses and looked down at the battering Old Town wooden canoe resting against the trail. Heavy ribs, warped planks, a craft that creaked and groaned under strain. And that's when it hit him. A rare moment where frustration collided with imagination. Why not aluminum? What began as Bill Hoffman's moment of frustration on a portage trail became something much bigger. He took his idea back to Long Island, where Grumman engineers bent aircraft-grade aluminum into the shape of a canoe. The result was light, nearly indestructible, and tough enough to bounce off boulders where wooden canoes would split apart. Soon, Grumman was producing thousands, and the aluminum canoe became a symbol of post-war outdoor life, filling scout camps, summer lakes, and expedition trips across the country. But while these revolutionary canoes were putting more Americans on wild rivers than ever before, those same wild rivers were disappearing at an alarming pace. The Chattooga, with its steep gradient and powerful, free-flowing waters, seemed destined for the same fate as its neighboring rivers. All around it, the age of dam building was in full swing. To the west, the Tallulah River had already fallen. Between 1913 and 1927, Georgia Railway and Power Company completed 6 dams along a 26-mile stretch, creating what became the most completely developed stretch of waterway in the country. This, quote, vertical river was a marvel that electrified Atlanta and became the template for modern hydraulic engineering worldwide. In 1923, the Chattooga wasn't completely spared. Tougaloo Dam was built just downstream, flooding 4 miles of the Chattooga and drowning waterfalls that locals called Thunder Falls for the sound they made each spring. Reports from the construction of the Tougaloo Dam were sparse in that remote corner of the state, except for one day in May 1923. This is the day of the big blast. The air in the Tougaloo River Gorge on that afternoon, on May 1st, 1923, was thick with tension. On one side of the river, hundreds of spectators dotted the mountainside, their gazes fixed across churning water. They were there to witness an act of creation born from the act of destruction. For 6 months, workers had been preparing for this moment, drilling a network of holes 150 feet into its solid rock. Those holes were now packed with 2 carloads of TNT, over 50,000 pounds of raw power waiting for a spark. At 4:15 p.m., just 30 minutes before a scheduled blast, a young reporter from Atlanta nervously approached the man at the center of it all, the chairman of the board for the Georgia Railway and Power Company. A moment of your time?
Speak quickly, son. History waits for no one, and we're about to make some.
That's just it, sir. The sheer scale of this, it's hard to comprehend. The engineers say you're about to slice the mountain off like a piece of cake. Doesn't it feel like you're playing God?
Playing God? Young man, what you call playing God, I call using the brain. He gave us. That river in all its wild beauty is a giant sleeping beauty. Its power flows uselessly to the sea. But 200,000 tons of rock flung into a river in an instant? When their homes are bright and their industries thrive, they'll understand. They'll thank us for having the vision to see a powerhouse where others only saw a waterfall. Now stay quiet and watch. You're about ready to witness the earth move.
Then it happened, not with a sharp crack, but with a deep, gut-wrenching, low boom that seemed to come from the mountain's core. The very ground began to rock. A low rumble, like a thunder magnified 1,000 times, rolled through the gorge as a vast cloud of smoke and dust erupted skyward. When the dust finally began to settle, a sheer rock cliff stood where a gentle slope had been just moments before. The future of Georgia had been blasted into a new shape. To the east, plans would later be created to dwarf even Georgia's power's ambition. Today, you heard 2 separate threads being spun across an increasing, electrifying America. A frustrated engineer in New York and 3 men around a campfire in Georgia giving a name to a story that would become legend. You witnessed the raw power of progress as it literally moved mountains to get what it wanted. Each thread was a revolution in the making, but they were spinning in a world that was running out of time. The clock was ticking. Progress had already taken 4 miles of the Chattooga and drowned Thunder Falls forever. Next time on The Outfall,
these threads unexpectedly begin racing towards the same wild river.